teams open up training camps with the same refrain. This is our year. Nothing can stand in our way but ourselves. Well, maybe that should read 31 teams, because for the Arizona Cardinals, it is never their year. And maybe the biggest thing standing in their way is a curse. This is what you don't know about the curse of the Pottsville Maroons. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Hello.
And today we have a story, maybe an explanation for why the Cardinals are always so bad. Of course, they get to be playing hosts as we're recording to this year's Super Bowl, so we thought we'd tell you a little bit about them. Blake, before we get into it, which sport has the best championship format?
Not the NFL in the 1920s.
Correct. Yeah.
We'll get into that, I guess. So talking professional sports, because professional, I would say my favorite tournament ever is March Madness, the college basketball tournament at the end of every year there. I think that is the most exciting and the funnest way to decide a champion. Does the best team always win? No. Which is part of the issue, in my opinion, in some aspects. The best team during the regular season doesn't always win the year, which to me is a little weird. And so, not that I dislike like the Game 7 NBA Finals and Super Bowls and NHL Stanley Cups, but in my opinion, the fairest way, potentially, if that, maybe I'll put it that way, the fairest way to decide a champion is the way that European soccer does it, in which they do not have a postseason. They just let the best team during the regular season be the champion, because they just spent 8 months showing everybody that they were the best team. And so to me, that seems the fairest. And so that seems like the best championship format. Now, it's not the most exciting, because the most exciting would be a Game 7 NBA Finals or a Super Bowl or something like that. But if you're strictly talking about how to crown the actual best team as the best team, I think they got it right, because there's just so much unknown when you get to American sports and the way we do playoffs.
Yeah, I would argue I'm all for regular season champions playing everybody like you can in European soccer the same number of times. I am for schedules like that. The argument I would throw out there in terms of fairness is that there's some schedule luck involved in those full season competitions when you get healthy. Like there's always something arbitrary about sport in general when you play that long, like several months at a time, like a professional sports season. And there's always something arbitrary, be it the end date, be it the way the postseason plays out. In this case, you might play a team twice and their best players hurt both times you played them. You just got lucky. You got wins there. Somebody else comes in, the closest team to you had to play that team healthy. So having a championship game or a championship series or a couple of teams in a playoff, I think is not terrible. And so I think for me, the best championship format, they're ruining it. They're making it worse year after year. I think baseball had it right. If you're going to have divisions, put your division champions in a tournament and go. Now they're letting in, I think, too many wild cards for me. Same thing in the NFL. I think 14 out of 32 may be a little exaggerated. I'm fine with just the 4 division champions. The way the schedules are constructed, just put the 4 division champions in a tournament. It's never going to happen because of TV and everything else. But yeah, baseball had it the closest. I do like the way soccer does it, though. Just play your games. Whoever's got the most points wins.
And that's the interesting part about the American sports is like in European soccer, you have the divisions, obviously. And so like all 20 teams in the English Premier League are in the same division or to the same conference because,
right.
And just the way that it was constructed over history, they were all brought into like this thing at the same time. Whereas if you think about like how the NFL came about, it was 2 leagues that just agreed to play together, and American sports ended up that way, like American League, National League, and it's like,
right.
let's just combine each other and play each other. So like the way that our leagues in America were founded, this is the only way, potentially, unless we wanted to just redo everything from scratch. But of course, that's never going to happen because TV and money and all that stuff. But this year's Super Bowl is interesting because I said the best 2 teams don't always play and the best team doesn't always win. Well, this year's Super Bowl is the 2 number 1 seeds who had byes. And so kind of contradicting myself here, but because they somehow the NFL ended up correctly, if you're thinking of it like the rightful champion needs to be, like the best teams need to compete in the final game. It's not like the New York Giants where they were a 6 seed and they won, upsetting the Patriots and whatever. These are the 2 best teams from the regular season, and that is cool. But historically, that doesn't always happen. It happens less often than otherwise.
I agree. And as we mentioned, the 1920s NFL championship format was not the best. So let's jump in and figure out exactly why. In this story that I'm going to set up for you, this controversy, there's essentially 4 characters. So let me introduce those to you first. The first character is the NFL itself. In 1925, it was the 6th season of what would become the National Football League. These seasons were the Wild Wild West in every sense of the word. The only sport that had normal operations in our minds at that point in history would have been baseball, which was operating essentially the way it does now. Several series spread out through the years, essentially the same number of games. The league scheduled it all. All of that makes sense to us. None of that happened in the NFL. Teams could schedule anyone they wanted. Could be NFL teams, could be independent teams. Who cares? Play what you want to play anytime they wanted. You want to play on a Sunday, fine. You want to play on a Tuesday, fine. You want to play on a Wednesday, fine. You want to play on all 3 this week, also okay. Multiple games a week allowed. And the only rule was that in most seasons, minus the first one, only games against NFL teams counted in the NFL standings. That's it. Play whatever teams you want. Play them as many times as you want, whenever you want, but we're only going to count the NFL games. It was not until 1935, 15 years into the existence of the league, that the league required the same number of games for each team. And it was 2 years later in 1937 that it went to 1 game a week with a certain number of weeks in the schedule, and that the league took over the scheduling. Because of this whole ordeal, many teams supplemented their actual NFL games with games against colleges, semi-pro teams, amateur teams. This would, from time to time, involve some high school shenanigans that we're going to get into later. And the games happened during the week. Some teams on road trips to go from one side of the league or to the other, if they wanted to, expand their horizons, would play on consecutive days in a mini barnstorming situation. That's never going to happen in modern football, but can you imagine 2 teams just teeing it up back-to-back days?
No, that sounds absolutely miserable, when you were mentioning that NFL teams could just play college teams and high school teams even, or semi-pro teams, my first thought was all the people who think that a college football national champion could beat the worst NFL team on a yearly basis. Like that's so you're saying in 1935 that could have happened. It probably did happen at some point.
Absolutely. Yes, could
Ugh.
have. And we were in a time where that actually might have been a thing where the college team could win,
Yeah.
because the changes in quality weren't as big as they are now. Anybody
Right.
that thinks it could happen now, it's not possible.
It's laughable.
You've got 53 pros on the worst team in the NFL. There are, even if it's Alabama or Ohio State, there's 20 or 30 pros on the roster, and
I
most
don't
of
get it.
them are not old enough to be pros yet. Like
Right.
they're not even the starter on their team. So yeah, I understand the mindset, but it just would never happen. Also, the pros would be very much upset of the whole situation and would absolutely make it their goal.
They would hurt people.
Yeah, that would be embarrassing. They're not going to let themselves be embarrassed any more than they would being on the worst NFL team already. The championship format. The first year they voted on the champions. Every year after that, they gave the championship essentially to the team with the best record at the end of the season. As we know from college football, the best record doesn't necessarily mean you're the best team. You can schedule the worst teams over and over and over again, have an undefeated season, and not be better than the team over here that scheduled a difficult schedule. But this was kind of the way championships were decided in all sports. You mentioned European soccer. Their model was to play games. Whoever came out ahead was the winner. Baseball's World Series at the time was still just American League versus National League, full season champion. Your guys, our guys, we play a thing. The Southern Conference, which had the first college basketball tournament, that event was only 5 years old in 1925. So this concept of a postseason, putting your best teams together in a championship outside of just an exhibition, wasn't something that was the norm. And there were several controversies, as you can expect, about who was named champions. The games themselves, by the way, I told you that you could just schedule them whenever. This included like when the season started and ended. Several years, teams scheduled games past when the league said the season would end. And sometimes the league counted those games, sometimes they didn't. In 1921, they counted a game that happened after the league calendar had ended in the standings, which changed the champion. In 1924, they did not do the same thing. They counted it as an exhibition. And this is to say that early decisions made in the NFL by the teams had absolutely no consistency whatsoever. Sometimes a thing would be okay, sometimes a thing would not be okay, and it just kind of was with the wind how anybody was going to decide it.
Yeah, if you look at the standings from back then, like the champion could have been 8-0, but the second place team could have finished the season 13-1. It's like, well, why? Well, it's because all these old people, all these old white men all the owners would just get into a room and they would literally vote on who the best team was at that point.
Yeah.
And that's terrible. Absolutely terrible. And so I guess relative to this time period, any postseason is probably better than no postseason, no matter the format, deciding a champion.
Yeah. And that's how we ended up with college bowls.
Right?
Okay. So now back to our story. Character 2 is the protagonist of the story, the Pottsville Maroons. Pottsville, Pennsylvania, very small town, had a football team that had previously competed in the Anthracite Football League, so named because it was an association of coal mining towns in the Northeast and Midwest, anthracite being the proper name for that substance. The Anthracite Football League. The team was among the first in the area to fully professionalize. It had dedicated players during the season. It also, novel concept, required that those players live in Pottsville during the season rather than come in on a train on game days. This gave them the newfangled ability to practice regularly.
What?
We're talking about practice, which made them one of the best teams in the area. In 1924, that Anthracite Football League folded, and the Maroons became a member of the NFL in 1925. Character 3 is going to be our antagonist, the Chicago Cardinals. They were founded at the beginning of football in 1898, slowly becoming one of the first football professional teams in the country. They played against other Chicago area squads, and then the little, upper Midwest circuit in Wisconsin and the surrounding areas. By 1920, they became one of the founding members of the NFL, along with the Decatur Staleys, who we now know as the Chicago Bears. They are the only two founders still remaining. You can find some sources that call the Green Bay Packers a founding member, but that franchise actually did not play in the first season of the NFL, and the original Packers were disbanded and a new team created in their spot. So we're not going to count the Packers as a founder here. And as you can imagine, the first few seasons of these two teams in Chicago, they created a little bit of a rivalry that would last for most of the Cardinals' time in the city. So we got 3 of our characters so far.
See, this is a time where you wish that you wish they had never left, because keep coming back to college basketball or college football, but because of the regionality and the universities can't relocate. Well, I guess you can. Universities have relocated in the past, but it never, ever happens. But imagine what this rivalry would be today. You think about the Packers and the Bears, and yes, it's old and forever, but this would be another cool one, if not for all the relocations that the Cardinals are about to have to go through. But it would be cool to still have those, but division realignment and all of these weird things are taking those away one by one, and eventually there will be none left, which will be sad.
Yeah. Speaking of universities moving, we should do an episode on Wake Forest.
You know how many times I have been asked that question?
Why is Wake Forest not?
Why is Wake Forest and not in Wake Forest?
Surprise tobacco money. That would be.
Yep.
That would be okay. Let's put
that'd be
that
fun.
On our podcast.
Anyway,
that's a good one.
I'm writing that down.
The 4th character, the side character who's gonna be kind of the catalyst of all of the controversy that is to come, is the Frankford Yellow Jackets. The Frankford Yellow Jackets are essentially the spiritual predecessors of the Philadelphia Eagles. Not a direct lineage, but more or less. This was a conglomeration of different athletic clubs and associations that eventually just kind of meshed together to become the Frankford Yellow Jackets. Frankford, not particularly a city itself. It's actually just the northeast portion of Philadelphia. They were kind of highlighting their section of town more than the city as a whole. They gained a reputation as a good team throughout their history, calling themselves the champions of the East throughout the early 1920s. Even when they weren't in the NFL, this gave them the ability to eventually schedule an exhibition game against the Canton Bulldogs, who were the NFL champion one year, almost winning that game. And in part because of that, and going a total of 6-2-1 in 1922 and 23 against mostly NFL teams, they were allowed to join in the NFL in 1924. They immediately went 11-2-1 in their first season, but they lost the title to the Cleveland Bulldogs and the Chicago Bears. The Bulldogs had played significantly fewer games than the Yellow Jackets had, but their win percentage was higher. The Chicago Bears actually came in second, and this one is one that is more aggravating than anything else I've seen. They had less games. They also had less wins. They also, by any stretch of the imagination, had a worse record than the Yellow Jackets, but they got second place because here's the way they calculated this, okay? The Bears went 6-4-4.
Ew. What? Why so many games?
Live fact checking here. They went 6-1-4. Sorry, 6-1-4.
That count sounds better.
Now, the way the NFL counted ties then is they just threw the ties out. They didn't count ties in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So rather than it looking at the thing and saying they've won 6 out of their 11 games, they looked at it as they went 6-1, and they only counted those 7 towards the winning percentage. So they had a better winning percentage than the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. In today's NFL, they count a tie as half a win and half a loss so that it still counts in your winning percentage in the standings. Otherwise, you're just throwing away games, and that's silly. Under those rules, Frankfurt would have come in second, just to illustrate how wonky even doing just straight up standings were at the time. They lost a title because they played too many games.
Which is incredible, because you'd think that like playing the extra games and all that stuff would either one prepare you for better play against better competition. You don't want to get cold, so you play more regularly. So when you do play somebody decent, you're ready for it. But I'm still just mind blown that they could, like, it was just completely free and wide open to just play as many people as you want. And then, like, if you, I wonder if, like, how many non-NFL games these teams would play on average, because there's probably some really cool, like, NFL college rivalry that went on for a little bit while this was okay. And that, like, a college team and an NFL team that played regularly, that played on a yearly basis, that I mean, may or may not have been competitive, but like it was still cool. Like that, you knew these teams were going to play at the same time in the same place every year or whatever. So that would be interesting to know.
Yeah. So there were enough college teams would have been like here and there, but there were enough independent teams that in 25 and 26, the first American Football League rival popped up. And to combat that, the NFL expanded pretty quickly from just over 10 teams to like 22 all at one time to try and like get those teams into the league and prevent them from joining the AFL. So they played independent teams pretty regularly. It looked like the 3 teams that I sampled, I didn't look at everybody's schedule, actually 5 teams that I sampled for this 25 season. They played, it was honestly like a college schedule. They played a week 1 game against an independent team. They played a couple of NFL games somewhere 2/3 of the way through the season, played another independent game, and then wrapped it up maybe with a couple of independents at the end. So similar to what you would think of in college scheduling, conference, non-conference kind of games. So yeah, non-NFL rivalries, definitely a thing. Definitely a thing. And that's how Frankfurt made it into the NFL in the first place, is grabbing NFL teams, getting attention, even though they weren't in. All this leads us to the very controversial 1925 NFL season. The regular season was slated to end on December 6th, but the NFL decided to allow teams to schedule team games through December 20th, just in case they needed more cash. You need extra money, you got to make sure you make payroll, whatever. You can schedule 2 extra games if you want to through December 20th. Frankfurt defeated Pottsville 20-0 on November 14th and thought that was going to put them both in the fast lane for the championship, and that their champion of the East moniker was going to remain intact. This in turn led them to create a postseason exhibition with a team headlined by players from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It was essentially a Notre Dame all-star team. Think a group of alumni getting together. There weren't any active college players that were going to play in the game, but several of their recent alumni were going to pop in. But Frankfurt lost 3 of their last 4 NFL games down the stretch, including the return game at Pottsville, which they lost 49-0. And after that loss, Notre Dame shifted their focus to the Pottsville Maroons instead. Now, Pottsville played at a tiny high school stadium. I say tiny, it sat about 6,000 people. So, not the smallest thing you've ever heard of. It didn't technically meet the NFL's requirements at the time, but because Pottsville was close to Frankfurt, it was close to a couple of other places, they allowed them to play in the NFL in the first place. All this is to say that the Maroons wanted a better stadium to play in than their rinky-dink high school field. And so they go to Philadelphia, right down the road, and contract with Shibe Park. Some of you may know it as Connie Mack Stadium. Others of you may have never heard of it before. This was the MLB stadium in Philadelphia until around the 70s. It sat basically 5 times as many people, around 30,000. And so they were going to play this game in Philadelphia. Frankfurt, for their credit, after they found out they weren't going to play Notre Dame, decided to play a home game against the Cleveland Bulldogs to get some more money. And because of this situation, when Frankfurt found out that Pottsville was going to play that Notre Dame game in Philadelphia, their city, and it was definitely going to get more attention, more coverage, probably outdraw their game against Cleveland, they had a problem. They said that this game was in their territory. It's important to know that territorial rights were not strictly enforced and didn't really exist in the NFL at this time. Now, obviously, if Dallas wanted to play Washington in Los Angeles for some reason, that would be a problem. Everybody would know that was a problem. The Rams and Chargers would have to agree to it way in advance. Like, this is just a thing. But back then, wasn't a thing. Okay. And that's why the game was scheduled in Philly in the first place. If territorial rights had been a thing, they wouldn't have done that. So everybody thinks they're doing the right thing, but Frankfurt gets upset. And that is where we will pause for just a moment to do trivia.
Bum, bum, bum.
All right. So I've been telling you about one of the founding members of the National Football League.
Oh, man.
And we know they're going to move a couple of times because they're not the Chicago Cardinals anymore. In our Big Four sports, there were 38 total founding members. Name them all. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
12 of those founding members still exist to this day. So the Big Four leagues, 12 of them still have, or there are 12 teams that were founding members still in existence. 6 have moved from their original place. I just want to know which one moved first. And for the record, the leagues we're considering are just the National League in baseball, the Basketball Association of America in the NBA, not the NBL or any other league, the NHL itself, and the NFL itself, the American Professional Football Association.
So six of the teams, 6 of the founding, what'd you say, 38 across all sports leagues are not where they were when their leagues were founded.
Yes.
I don't know those 6, but you want to know which one was the first to move?
Yeah.
So I'm wrapping my head around this. One of those 6 is now the Arizona Cardinals. Is that right?
One of the 6 is the Arizona Cardinals now.
Okay. I think I'm following. Holy crap. What league did the team that moved first play in?
The National League of Professional Baseball Clubs.
Baseball, National League. Okay, it would have been... wait a minute. Okay. Of the National League teams, I don't know how many were there when... Couldn't have been that many teams in total when the National League was even founded.
That is correct.
How do I figure out which one?
I'll make that a question for you. There were only 8 teams in the National League at its creation.
8 teams total. They were all. Okay, wait. I don't think I'm in the right league. I think I'm thinking of the wrong league because. Yeah, I think I'm in the wrong league in my head. Let's see. How else could I figure it out? Only 8 of them. I have no idea what even to ask.
Only 2 of these teams exist in today's Major League Baseball.
Only 2 of the 8 are even there still, yes. But yes. One of them was the first one to move among all the sports,
and still exists. Yeah, this was the wildest question I could come up with. I'm sorry.
This is crazy. Oh man, I can't. I'm trying to come up with. I'm trying to even just remember all the National League teams. That's the problem. I don't even have like a bank in my head to choose from. Because I'm thinking like, I'm like I keep combining like cities and nicknames in my head.
It's not the worst idea.
But I don't even know.
The cities part, not bad.
It's like hard to remember where they were at the time or like where they would have been in like 1900.
Yeah, if you do the cities thing, you're going to end up okay.
So I'm thinking early Major League Baseball period. And there was a Boston team. There would have been a Brooklyn team. There should have...
Not in the OG.
Not that early?
Correct.
A Philly team, maybe? There were some weird ones that I would probably have never even heard of.
So far you've been correct. There was a Boston team. There was a Philadelphia team. No Brooklyn.
Brooklyn wasn't there. Thinking of other Northeast teams, but is it okay? So, like, what region of the country would this team be in?
New England.
It's not the Boston team, is it?
It is the Boston team.
What were they called? Like the Boston Bean Eaters or something.
They were actually the Boston Red Stockings, but not the Boston Red Sox.
That was the National League team?
Yes.
Oh.
Changed their name a couple of times. One of them, I think, might have been Bean Eaters, yeah.
That was the earliest. I didn't know that. I wonder if they were the Red Stockings. I don't know. I didn't say that originally because of the ALNL thing.
Now you got to figure out where that team is now.
The original Boston Red Stockings.
Yeah, where are they? You're going to hate yourself so much.
Yeah, probably. They're not still in Boston, are they?
Absolutely not.
Surprise. This is gonna piss me off. I can already tell.
Oh yeah, it is.
I don't know. I can't put it together.
You can ask for like.
Is there a current team? The current team is they moved from the Boston.
They've moved like 3 times.
They moved more than that. Okay.
Yeah.
Who played for them? I'm gonna mess this up too, but I figured I may as well ask.
No, you're not. Henry Aaron, Greg Maddux, John Smoltz.
That's the same team.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So
how did the Atlanta Braves? How did they end up?
They
I didn't think.
originated. So yeah, they started in Boston. Eventually, they changed their name several times. Eventually, becoming the Boston Braves.
Right.
So then the Boston
That was
Braves
the
move
National League
to
hat.
Milwaukee,
Because
and then Milwaukee moves to
Boston did have
Atlanta.
two teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's what was messing me up in my head. I was thinking like each city had one, but
Yeah.
I was forgetting that uh, cities could have more than one, and especially then they did.
Yeah,
And then
because
like
you have
one of the two would like get
25-year
kicked
head start.
out or something.
Yeah.
Man.
So the Cubs are the other remaining founder of the National League.
Oh.
The Philadelphia A's
I
got
almost
expelled.
said the Athletics.
So they got tossed after the first year, and then the Phillies started after that. And then Hartford had a team that folded. New York had a team that folded. St. Louis had a team that folded. The Cincinnati Reds disbanded and then came back, so it's not the same team. And Louisville had a team that folded. But the Braves first moved in 1953. They were the first founder to move. In the NBA, we got the Celtics, Pistons, Lakers, Knicks, Warriors, and Royals. Now the Kings, who are founding members. The Pistons moved in 1957 to Detroit. The Royals started their first of their journey in 1957. Lakers in 61, Warriors in 62. The NHL only had 5 teams. The Canadians and Maple Leafs are the only 2 that have survived all the way to today. And then the NFL has the Cubs and not the Cubs. I put Cubs. That's wrong. Bears and Cardinals. The Cardinals would move in 1960.
Geez, so I was thinking they moved a lot sooner.
Yeah.
Than the 50. I was thinking like I have to figure out a team that like existed in 1900 and then moved in like 1905. That's how I was thinking.
I knew it was going to be a baseball team, and I was ready for it to be an early move, and it wasn't. And then I was like, did an NBA team move first? Was it the Pistons? That would be awesome. But yeah.
Good one.
All right, let's rejoin our story just in time for the controversy. Everything's going to boil to a head. The NFL notified Pottsville of Frankfurt's issue with where this game against Notre Dame was going to be played. They put in writing that continuing along with the game would force harsh sanctions and possibly even a suspension by the NFL if they went forward. Pottsville would later claim that oral permission during a phone call was given by the league separate from the letter, but the league denies it. Just a reminder, you should always get things in writing, not verbally told to you, because verbal doesn't exist in real life. In the meantime, the NFL season continued on. A December 6th showdown, which, remember back to the beginning of our story, was supposed to be the last week of the regular season. A December 6th showdown between Pottsville and the Chicago Cardinals headlined the week's NFL action. The Cardinals entered 9-1-1. Pottsville came in at 9-2, meaning forget the ties. This game is for the NFL championship. Whoever wins is the champion. Pottsville took a 14-0 lead into the second quarter en route to a 21-7 win in the game, giving themselves a championship, booking themselves into this game against Notre Dame, and finishing. They added one more game against Providence to round out their championship season. They were flying high. In that Notre Dame Pottsville game, a fourth quarter field goal gave the Maroons a 9-6 win over Notre Dame, right? College teams could beat, or at least college alumni could beat professionals. But that's going to be the last good news of the NFL season for them. Immediately after the game, Pottsville was suspended. Their game with Providence was called off. They weren't booted from the league. Some people would say, some accounts of this say that they were completely removed from the league. That's not the case. Their record was allowed to remain. They just couldn't finish their season. And that left them at 10-2 for the season with a winning percentage of .833. Chicago used its 2 weeks of extra games to schedule a couple of games against the Milwaukee Badgers and the Hammond Pros. Hammond was a scalding 1-4 on the season, having played Chicago, Detroit, Green Bay circuits. They were playing the hardest teams in the league, but they did it like Duke does from time to time in football, just not very well. Their only win came against, by the way, like this is wild. Their only win of the season was against the Cardinals. That one in the 9-1-1 record of the Cardinals was Hammond. Their 1-1-4 was Chicago. That is incredible. Milwaukee, on the other hand, was 0-6 and had scored a grand total of 7 points in the season. 1 touchdown, 1 extra point, all they could muster in 6 games of action. Both teams had already disbanded for the season. Milwaukee's last game was on November 22nd, but they scheduled this game on December 10th. Hammond's last game was on November 1st, and they were called back for a December 12th game against Chicago. Needless to say, the Cardinals won both of these games, but they generated their own controversy in the process. Time for controversy part 2. So we've already got this game that was played kind of out of pocket in the wrong place. That created a tussle. Here's tussle 2. Like, this is already too much drama for me. I don't know about you.
This is confusing, but I'm following.
Okay. So, in scheduling these 2 games, the Cardinals played the Milwaukee Badgers, and they were worried that the Badgers, having already ended their season and sent everybody home, weren't going to have enough players to play the game. This was mentioned by Cardinal owner Chris O'Brien in front of their star quarterback Art Foles, who was, by the way, 5'7" and 157 pounds. It was much easier for this is gonna play an important role in a second when I tell you what Foles did. Just remember, 5'7", 157 pounds is the star quarterback. He heard that there weren't going to be enough players. He decided to take things into his own hands because he's a Chicago native. His first idea was to contact some old high school teammates of himself who could just show up. They could play the game. We just need to win. Who cares? But while he was traveling, he didn't get a chance to meet up with them, but did stop at a local high school where he saw 4 high school players he thought were really good. He sat down and had a conversation with them. And by the time it was done, they had decided that these 4 high school kids should come play for the Milwaukee Badgers against the Chicago Cardinals. He basically recruited these 4. He thought no one was going to show up. This team was supposed to be terrible. It was on a Thursday afternoon. Nobody's coming to the game. I'll get these 4 dudes. Nobody will know they're here. We'll play the game. Everything will be fine. No biggie. They won't hurt their amateur status. We're all good. Not so fast, my friend. Foles brings the players to the game, and as they're warming up, he starts to notice that a crowd is pouring in. The record says that he was startled to see how many people were there, and some of those people recognized these 4 high school players. Foles brought them to the game, turned them over to Milwaukee owner Ambrose McGurk. That's the coolest name you'll hear.
Wow.
Ambrose McGurk, who dressed them in Badgers uniforms and allowed them to play. These 4 kids, upon being recognized, got turned in to the appropriate authorities, and we have a problem. When the NFL commissioner, Joseph Carr, recovered from appendicitis that he had that weekend, because this story just needs extra stuff.
Yeah, just throw that in there.
He snapped into action. He did all the big boy things in this situation, and I mean all of them. The 4 high school players were suspended for violating amateurism. They played against professionals. There's an assumption that they got paid. Y'all are out. O'Brien, the owner of the Cardinals, was fined $1,000. McGurk was fined $500, and he was forced to sell his team within 90 days. And Foles received a lifetime ban from the NFL, and it was declared that the game was to be stricken from the record. So he got off that operating table, and he went to work.
Jeez.
In the best of Roaring Twenties fashion. The hammer.
This is like some Kennesaw Mountain Landis judgment, put the gavel down kind of stuff. Because just showing up and cleaning house. It's like, you want to mess with my sport? get out. Everybody. I wonder what $1,000 was in this year compared to now. I mean,
I think
that
it's
was a
like
good amount of money.
13 grand, I think.
Decent money, especially when they weren't making
Oh, yeah,
what owners and players had today. So like,
yeah,
just man, it just cleans house of this franchise because their quote unquote star quarterback was an idiot.
yes. And this is the reaction I wanted you to have. I wanted you to go Kennesaw Mountain Landis, like bringing the hammer. This is some of the best of the 1920s, because what happens next is also some of the best of the 1920s. Before that school year was out, the 4 high school players were reinstated. 2 of them even received all-star honors for their time in the football season. By the summertime, the $1,000 fine to O'Brien had been rescinded because the Cardinals were going to go bankrupt. So they said, okay, you're fine. Foles was let back into the NFL. So the lifetime suspension was really just not at all. All this goes well except for 2 groups of people. Number one, Ambrose McGurk had followed through on the 90 days to sell his team. He sold it to one of his players. The team would move and fold the next year. So didn't work out for him. The walking back of all of this hammer throwing, get in the newspaper, look good stuff. The walking it back didn't help him. And the league never got around to striking the game from the record. So Pottsville plays Notre Dame in Philadelphia in a thing that doesn't actually violate any league rules. They are suspended, booted, goodbye. Can't play Providence to end their season. Chicago does things that are actually against the rules. Nothing happened. The Cardinals finished the season 11-2-1, and because the game wasn't stricken, and because tied games didn't count in the standings, they were 11-2, which is an .846 win percentage. You may recall that I said that the Maroons finished their season with an .833 winning percentage. And so Chicago became the league champions. Had the game been stricken as it was supposed to, they would have finished 10-2-1. Throw out the tie. That's the same record as Pottsville. Pottsville beat them on the field. They're the champions. At worst, they share the championship. Had the game been stricken from the record and the NFL counted ties like a normal human being, Pottsville is the champion going away, and there's no controversy at all. The NFL, at the owners' meetings, tried to give. Now, this is where I'm going to give the Cardinals and O'Brien, their owner, a little bit of credit. They tried to give him the championship, and he declined it. He had not scheduled the 2 games at the end of the season to try and catch back up to Pottsville. He did it because he needed money. And he claimed he didn't know about the high school players, but because they were there and the game shouldn't have counted, he said, this is a bogus title. I don't want it. And from 1925 to 1933, as long as he owned the team, they did not claim it. The league said they were the champions, but they did not. So first of all, shout out to my man O'Brien for doing the right thing and not taking the low road out there. But his successor would not be the same. The Cardinals were sold to Charles Bidwell. That's the same family that still owns the Cardinals in 1933. And in 1933, Charles Bidwell immediately claimed that championship as their own. The team did win another title in 1947, kind of interestingly, over the Philadelphia Eagles, the predecessor to the Yellow Jackets. But they lost to them in 1948 and have not won a title since. Unfortunately for the Maroons, their story doesn't end well either. They moved to Boston in 1929 and then folded after that season. Here is some evidence that this Cardinals franchise is now cursed because of this stolen title in 1925. At the time of the 1925 season, the Chicago Cardinals were 30, 16, and 5. That's a winning percentage of 638. They are now 581, 790, and 41. That's a winning percentage of 424. The only two teams in the history of the National Football League with worse winning percentages are the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Which is interesting because the Jags have never played in the Super Bowl, but the Bucs have played. They've won 2.
But they were real bad in
But they were that much worse when they weren't winning that they are worse than 424 lifetime, equal to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yes.
Well, similar to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yes. Yeah. Jeez. And they're and the Cardinals are far and away, like on the all-times wins list, it's all old teams. On the win percentage list, they are the only old team that is anywhere near the bottom. Like
how do they still exist? That's the crazy part. It's like they have been this bad for this long and they're still going at it.
Some of it is luck. Hold on to that thought. Some of it is absolute luck. They are. Here's another stat about the wins. Despite being one of the two founders, like, okay, think about this. The Bears are one of the two founders. The Packers, almost a founder. They are 1 and 2 all time in wins. Like this was the first year ever that the Packers passed the Bears for most wins. First time the Bears weren't first on that list. The Cardinals, who started at the same time, are 8th in wins.
Dang.
Like they're behind teams that were not founders. They're behind almost like there are teams from the 60s who are catching them and about to. The same as we said about the Detroit Lions in the Bobby Lane curse episode.
Dang.
So not good for them. The team, how do they exist? Their existence in Chicago fell off a cliff to the point where in the 50s, they almost folded. The only reason they are able to keep going is because the AFL popped up. And when it popped up, the NFL said, no. How about, hey, you guys move wherever you want to go, anywhere you want to go. New city, go for it. They were going to keep them in Chicago before that and let them fail if they had to. But because the AFL popped up, they let them move to St. Louis in 1960, which saved the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't win anything while they were there. And then they remained there until 1988. Same thing happened. Bad team. People stopped going to see it in a weird baseball stadium situation, and they moved to Phoenix and basically repeated the same process again. They have existed since the beginning of the NFL. There's not always been playoffs, but they have 11 total playoff appearances in their history, 11 playoff seasons. They've only won 6 playoff games. Half of them came in 2008.
This is in the Super Bowl era. Is that what we're considering playoffs?
So the starting with the NFL championship game.
Oh, so even before 30s, that.
So their 47 and 48 season where they won the title, lost the title are considered playoff appearances. But then, yes, the other ones have all come in the Super Bowl era because they irrelevant.
Because their loss to the Steelers gave half of that run in 2008 with Kurt Warner gave the franchise half of their lifetime playoff wins.
Yes.
Oh.
Now, this controversy has come up a couple times. Twice, the matter has been brought before the NFL owners themselves to be fixed. First, it happened in 1963. George Halas, famous owner of the Chicago Bears, and Art Rooney, famous owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, brought it up. Got a committee to look into it. Somehow, Charles Bidwell ended up on the committee that looked into it and looked it up, and he convinced everybody not to do anything about this situation. The league voted 12-2, with Halas and Rooney being the only dissenters, not to change anything about the 1925 season. On the back of a book called Breaker Boys, the NFL's greatest team in the stolen 1925 championship. You can look that up. It was published by ESPN Books. On the back of that, some marketing. It came up again in 2003. The Pennsylvania legislature passed a resolution asking the NFL to fix it. Pennsylvania's governor asked the NFL to fix it. George Bush sent a handwritten letter to ESPN calling the story illuminating. Like this had mainstream attention in 2003. Paul Tagliabue was the commissioner of the NFL and supported doing something. But when it went to the owners meeting, this time it was a 30-2 vote. Art Rooney and Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie, so the two teams in Pennsylvania where Pottsville is, voted to fix it. 30 teams voted to deny anything should be fixed. Some people in the town of Pottsville claim that there is a curse on the Cardinals, and no matter what happens, it will not be lifted until the championship is returned. But let it be known, they are fine with a split title, with a shared championship. They just want that team and that season to be recognized as an NFL championship season, which is fair, right?
Like, can't blame them.
They want it.
Yeah, you can't blame them for being upset.
In 2003, Art Rooney said, "What happened to this team in this town needs to be fixed." And maybe his team did a little bit of the fixing.
Got him.
Just not the right way. In 2008, as we said, the Cardinals finally found some success. They made a run through the NFC, oddly beating the Eagles, the same Eagles that they had beaten in 47 and lost to in 48, the ones that are the spiritual successors to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, whose fault this is in the first place. But you know the Super Bowl. You know this game. You are well aware of it. You know, it's the one where James Harrison goes 100 yards, his big tail rumbling and bumbling. And
bumbling, stumbling.
Needs oxygen for the whole next series after he does it. He goes 100 yards for a touchdown. The one where the Cardinals are down 20-7 in the fourth quarter, but took a lead with 23-20 with just 2 minutes and 57 seconds left. But it's the one where Santonio Holmes makes the greatest catch in Super Bowl history. I said it, not David Tyree. Santonio Holmes, greatest catch in Super Bowl history in the corner of the end zone on a miracle that his feet didn't leave the ground with 35 seconds left. And those Pittsburgh Steelers, Art Rooney Steelers, the ones that are trying to fix it for Pottsville, the ones from Pennsylvania, got one for themselves, maybe one for the Maroons too.
That is ridiculous. And I read somewhere where Cliff Kingsbury said something recently, like he was asked recently about like, the curse or whatever. He was like, I don't know what's going on in Pottsville. I don't know what they have. I don't know what they're doing, but they're gonna have to let us win. Basically, like basically the coach of the Cardinals is acknowledging, jokingly or not, that Pottsville is not allowing the Cardinals to win a Super Bowl. Like Pottsville is still the reason the Cardinals are bad, which is hilarious. But also about the Santonio Holmes thing, I am still not 100% sure that I have seen a replay that would prove to me that both of his toes were on the turf in the back of that end zone. It is a fantastic catch. It's better than David Tyree or Mario Manningham down the sideline.
Yeah, same idea. Yeah,
similar idea. It's better than Edelman's catch in the middle of the field for the Patriots comeback, because that catch scored the winning points.
The winning points.
That's
and
the
it's
difference.
Impossible that he caught it.
I'm not sure he did, but they called it anyway. And again, those toes were close. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, it was the thinnest. If he'd have polished those cleats at all, that's not a catch.
If that turf was cut any shorter, not a catch.
The only other wild thing about this is that Cardinals fans also recognize the situation. They have done things like all bad teams hate their owners. It's the owner's fault,
Yeah.
and most of the time it is
Washington.
and so the Cardinals have figured out that really what Pottsville hates and what the Cardinals hate is the Bidwell family. They share that in common. And so they've done GoFundMe's to create a replica trophy to send to Pottsville. They've sent letters being like, look, hey, guys, we get it, but it's you hate the family. Let us please forgive us. We didn't do it. Trying to get a mutual hatred situation going on to fix the curse. But yeah, this is the first one of these curses where the individuals involved are like, yeah, Pottsville, what y'all doing there?
What is going on?
Talking about it, yeah. So yeah. Any last thoughts?
No, it's a really funny story, and I don't have anything personally against the Arizona Cardinals, but this story is just too fun and too funny to me to let Arizona be good. So Pottsville, if you're out there listening, just hold on to whatever you're holding on to for as long as humanly possible. I don't want Kyler Murray's career to be ruined. I don't want he's great and all. I didn't want Larry Fitzgerald to retire without a Super Bowl. But man, this is a funny gig y'all got, and I think y'all should keep it going at this point.
It is. The longest championship drought in professional sports is the Arizona
from 47 to now.
Yep.
Hold on tight.
Absolutely. If you've got an idea, send it our way. We got a couple this week that we're going to be releasing in the future. So send us a message on social. Somewhere else we'll take care of that for you. And until next time, that's what you don't know about the Pottsville Maroon curse. See you later.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.